Hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nicholas and today I'm going to be working on my 1961 Imperial's carburetor. I'm going to be doing a rebuild and cleaning it up and getting it actually looking half nice and not greasy every time that I touch it. So I don't know much about these carburetors. I wouldn't say I'm the most qualified to answer questions or anything like that, but I know the general idea of them. And this is a 3108S, which was, I believe, an Imperial Specific carburetor. Not that it really makes a difference. They were probably all pretty much the same. I know some diameters are different and stuff like that, but they're all generally the same. So I do know that this is the original carburetor because of it being a 3108S, unless someone replaced it, but the likelihood of that is very, very little. It does look like there's some new components in it maybe, or they're just clean, I don't know. It does not have a PCV port, so at least I know that's original to the, or it does have the port, it's not opened up yet. I know that is original to the vehicle. So I'm going to be breaking this down. I'm not going to be doing a step-by-step like everything to it, but I'm going to be just doing a basic cleaning and everything like that. I'll show the cleaning up process as much as I possibly can. Now I would like to talk about something that I think is a little bit interesting. So when I first got the car, I had a 1960 Imperial manual right here, and 60 was kind of a changing year, so like same with 61, kind of a changing year for Imperial with a lot of the other vehicles too, but the 60 Imperial was a lot different. It matched the more 57 to 59 Imperials, and it was kind of changing over into the 61, so it was a real odd year. In 61, their service manual, they had an implement, or a supplement manual, and all it was just the added stuff that they changed throughout 61. The problem is it doesn't include half of the changes that Imperial made, so you're kind of left in the dark for a lot of stuff. So got the 62 manual. The 62 manual also leaves out a bunch of stuff. It has a lot more stuff than the 61, but it still leaves out a lot of other things, specifically like the 3108S carburetor, like data and stuff like that. So I'm only going to be going off of the carburetors that are in the 62 manual for settings, like the initial settings and everything. I will be writing down the settings that are on it currently. I'm going to get all that because that's useful to have sometimes. I do know that the car was running when it was sitting because it had an inspection sticker for a specific date. It was like 1995 or something. So I'm pretty sure it was running. If not, someone did some finagling there. But so it's just this kind of weird point in Imperial history where there's a lot of weird changes going on. So if you have a 61 or even a 60, I would recommend going all the way up to the 1962 Imperial manual just to have more information on weird changes that happened over time. So I was able to get the throttle blades out by drilling through the bores and just getting barely through it so that, well, I don't know how to explain this. The screws are still in this side right now, and I'm wanting to get this out so I can get it on a vise so I can get a really good drill on it so I'm not doing something stupid. And so right now I have to file the remaining screws down so that I can get this throttle shaft through. I'm not trying to take crazy amounts of brass off, just get it to where I can pull the shaft through. All right, so I was able to finish disassembling the carburetor, getting the throttle plates out and everything like that, and clean everything. As you can see, everything's nice and grime-free. So I was able to run everything through the sonic cleaner and get as much as I possibly could off of the carburetor. There's obviously going to be some stuff in certain areas still there, and I can't get everything. Certain bits of corrosion down inside these fuel bowls, just too hard to get, and it's not that important in all honesty. I got the big stuff and the stuff that would get caught up inside of a jet or something like that. So I wasn't able to remove these needle seats. I was not able to remove the jets or the accelerator pump stop, the ball bearing, because all of the brass does not want to come out, and instead of risking further damage to the parts, it's just, I know they're clear and I know they're working, so I'm just going to leave them be. I'm not going to touch them. At some point I might get into heating, you know, the assembly a little bit better with like a torch or something, like a small torch, and trying to get the jets out, but I don't need to, so I'm not going to. I did go through and I polished just about everything. Got everything to a good shine so that it just looks nicer. There's no like functional purpose to it except that it's easier to clean the next time I'm here. But everything came out pretty good, and you'll be seeing that as I go through. There is a couple things that I will need to go through on the setup of the carburetor before final assembly. Main thing when you're working with these, make sure all of your ports are clear. Make sure you blow them out with an air compressor and get all the junk out, because if you don't, you're risking, you know, trash or anything being trapped down inside those borers and then possibly going into the motor or getting caught up in an orifice somewhere. So the next step for me is to start assembling this bottom half and then the choke horn. So let's get on that. All right, first things first, we need to check the choke unloader. So the choke unloader connects to your choke plate in there like that, and you'll see it close up in a second. But what it will do is when there's vacuum, because the motor starts, it'll pull back just a little bit and it will crack open that choke plate just a little bit to let more air through. So you're not choking off the motor right off the rip. So an easy way to test that is to pull the choke unloader out, flip the choke horn over, take a vacuum gauge, just like a needle or a nozzle or anything. We're going to insert it into the port for the choke unloader, and you will see it suck up inside if it's working correctly. All right, so we know that it's working correctly. So there's nothing that needs to be fixed there. All right, so now we're going to install our choke plate rod. I'm just going to squirt a little bit of oil on the moving parts. Make sure the excess is wiped off. Run this guy in. Make sure that your notches are past your bleed ports. All right, now we're getting ready to put our choke plate in. First, I need to put some Loctite on these screws because I am not using the staking method, which Carter would have used to secure the screws from coming out. So now we're going to take our choke plate, drop it in there. This is our part. These are replacement screws, these are not factory. All right, now that we got our choke plate in, the screws are tight, we got Loctite on them. We're going to hook up our unloader, which uses a cotter pin. All right, now we're going to come over here. With the choke open, this bracket should be down. And then this bracket should also be down. Get your washer. Throw that down there. All right, now we're going to flip the top over, and we need to do a check real quick. So both float bowls I've already adjusted, but they need to be parallel with this gasket face. So the bottom of the bowl needs to be parallel with this face right here, and then it needs to be 7/32 sitting over the face. So I have this little half round stone that is 7/32, and if you set it right down on the gasket face, I know it's exactly over that 7/32 because it's barely touching it. So you need to make sure that both float bowls are adjusted the same way. Once you get them adjusted, then you need to take them back off. Make sure your needles are in. Set the gasket down. Make sure that it is seated completely. All right. Now, when you're adjusting your drop adjustment, you're adjusting this little tab right here. So you will bend it out or in to raise or lower that float bowl. And the measurement you're going for is 3/4 of an inch. If I can get this guy to line up, there we go. Now I already have a scale right here that's 3/4 of an inch. And by the end of the float bowl, you should have a 3/4 inch height with the gasket on it. So your 7/32 is without the gasket, and then your float bowl drop adjustment is with the gasket. All right, so now we're done with that. We're going to take our fuel inlet adapter, put a new gasket and the strainer on it. We're going to find our entry port and just gently seat it down. We're not tightening it right now. All right, so we're done with this guy. So now we're going to the bottom piece. All right, so the brass fittings that you need to make sure that are clean on these are your little accelerator pump ball bearing down in there. It keeps fuel from flowing back into the accelerator pump tube. Your primary jets, which are these front guys up here, and then your secondary jets, which are back here. You need to make sure that those are clean, and then you need to make sure that all of these ports inside here for your main jets and your Venturis are all clean. All right, so first things first that we need to accomplish on this before we get going with any of the Venturis or anything inside the carburetor itself, we need to get the throttle plates done. Now, the throttle plates, as you remember, I was drilling out. So this is the main throttle plate. This is your primary. I only screwed up one bore, and that was on the main drilling. Everything else I was able to get the screws out, the brass screws out, reversing them out the back way with a drill bit, and get everything going with that and not damage any of the threads. So because I destroyed the screws in the process of getting them out, the old ones out, I found a set of Allen screws. They're 632 screws. And these are my new throttle plate screws. So they don't sit flush like the old ones, but they meet the distance and everything like that. So I'm good to go on that. So I have everything replaced. Now it's just a matter of assembling it. So as before, we're going to oil the shaft. This is our primary shaft. So if the idle adjusting screws are on this side, the back of the carburetor is up here, these are your primaries and these are your secondaries. All right, we're going to slide this guy. That's me too. Might take some finagling. Make sure that your choke unloader, or the push rod itself, this will hit the choke open mechanically if you press the throttle. Make sure that this is on this side. You want it going towards the back of the carburetor. Now we'll take our secondary shaft, which you can see nothing is destroyed. I was able to actually preserve it, thank God. And this one had no damage to it, unlike the first one. Take our secondary shaft. You're going to run it through, and you're going to want this little notch kind of near the bottom. You'll figure out the rest when you actually get everything else installed for brackets. All right, now that I got my throttle plates, these are my primaries. Primaries are aluminum, secondaries are brass. We're going to take them. We're going to find the correct orientation. Which is right there. Grab my screws. All right, you're going to make sure they're nice and tight. And then make sure that your lines, your referencing lines, you can see them, they're right above the throttle bar. Make sure that they're straight with this throttle bar, they're parallel. Otherwise your plates are not straight. And make sure that they open and close correctly. All right, now for the brass ones. We're going to slide them in. I believe I have it backwards. There we go. There we go. Got that guy in. We're going to take our first one. Slide the brass plate, slide around a little bit, so I'm not going to take it all the way. Make sure that everything's aligned. Take them down. All right. Let's see if I can get a good picture here. You can see the secondaries look good. And then your primaries look good. And everything's sealing. That's the main goal, is sealing. All right, next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna get our idle adjustment screw, which is this guy. Here's the primary shaft and here's the front of the carburetor. He's gonna screw in there. Now you want it fully closed, the primary is fully closed, and then barely touching. Right now we're just wanting it barely touching so we can do our initial adjustments and set up the carburetor. Your next guy is going to be this little screw. It's going to go down here. But we'll see in a second. All right, now here's how I believe the carburetor is supposed to be set up for this choke lock or secondary lock. There's no real images or anything in the 61 manual that show you a good close-up of where all the brackets are supposed to go and how they're supposed to be orientated. So I'm just going with how I got it working correctly. If someone has one that they know 100% is correct and original, then obviously that would be the correct way to do it. But as far as I know, that this is the correct way. The main thing that's throwing me off are the springs that are wrapped around this guy right here, the indexing cam. So I'm not too sure about where everything goes, like I just said, but I'm pretty sure this is it. So you have your choke off right here, or your choke right here. You got your bracket that's already been mounted, and it has to be down. So this is your secondary lockout. It's like a pawl. That's what they call it in the manual. So you're going to make sure that your pawl is facing this way. And as you can see, the secondaries have a lever on them. And what you want is that pawl to hit that lever, which prevents them from opening. So you got that guy, and then your next piece is the bracket that connects your choke down to this stop down here, and then your fast indexing cam, fast idle indexing cam, which goes to the fast idle screw down here. So what you're going to do is take your screw, put some oil on it, slide it through your fast indexing cam. Then you're going to take your lever bracket and you're going to want it between the spring and that notch right there, that big lever sticking off. You're then going to screw it on, making sure that this lever that's coming off the other side is below this notch on the pawl. All right, once you've got that, you should have good movement this way, but it's loose the other way. Now you're going to take your connecting rod, slide it in, connect it to your top piece up here. Make sure everything's moving, nothing's striking. Close your choke, and your fast idle screw, let's see if I can get it. Your fast idle screw should be close to that screw. It should be on center. Obviously mine is not. There's two ways to get it exactly on center. First way is to bend this top lever up here. I'm sorry for it not focusing. And then bending this lever right here to get to that exact center point. I'm not bolted down yet, so I'm not going to adjust anything like that yet. But that's correct. That's where it's supposed to go. Make sure your fast idle screw is backed out enough to where you can see if this is centered or not. Obviously, that this isn't mounted and everything. You're going to have play, but you're going to have that center point. That's what you want, is that center point. And that looks like that spring slipped up over there. So Make sure that it's hitting that center point. That's your main focus with this. Otherwise, your fast idle is not going to work right. The thing's going to idle pretty high and you're not going to be able to figure it out. So we're going to take this guy back off for now. But we got this guy figured out, so we're good to tighten it down. All right, on to the other side. The other side is now our secondary brackets. So my secondaries are back here. So first things first, we're going to put this spring on. Hook towards the outside. Make sure you hook it on the bracket. Let's see, it's going to twist that way. Put your washer on. Tighten it down. Then you're going to take the spring and you're going to loop it around one time. Make sure the spring is relaxed. It's not binding anywhere. Now you should have, let's see if I can show this good. The secondaries don't open right now because that pawl is locking it. So if I pull that pawl away, the secondaries should open and they should close on their own. If they're not closing on their own, you need to go another coil on that spring. And again, if the pawl is closed, the secondaries don't open. If it's open, they function correctly. All right, I'm going to do my best to explain this. This is probably one of the more difficult parts of the linkages on the carburetor, and no wonder they changed it in '62. But you're going to have a spring, a housing for the spring, and then you're going to have a bracket that holds the other side of the spring, the flat stock coming off, the little excess wire coming off. And then you're going to have a hook on the other side. That hook doesn't hook there. We'll get to that in a second. All right, you're going to take the part that contains the spring. You want the excess going out the one side. Put that on your primary shaft. Then you're going to take your lever piece, the one that's got a notch on it. That's going to slide on, and it's going to hook that excess of that spring. Then you're going to make sure primaries are closed. This guy, he gets hooked right there. Now it's important that this notch is in between the two collision points on this last bracket. You can see, oh no, you can't see. This back bracket needs to be able to move. I'm doing my best to show it. It's a pain in the butt. Put your washer on and then tighten the screw. Now make sure your primaries are opening. Everything's good there. All right, now here comes the fun part, and you're gonna have to get that hook of that spring back around to the hook on this lever right here. So the easiest way that I've found, and if you got a better way in the comments, please let me know because this is a pain, is you pull the spring all the way around and drop it in like that. Now if it takes you a couple tries, the tip that I can recommend is make sure, hold on, let me get this, there we go. Make sure that you have this guy seated as far spun around as you possibly can so that you're giving yourself as much leeway with the spring to get it up onto that hook. I can't really explain it any better. If you know, you know. It took me a second to figure that out. Now we're going to take our linkage and we're going to take our short end, hook it on the secondary side, take our long end and hook it on the primary side, and install your clips. Now, if I did everything correctly, I should be able to open my primaries. Nothing happens because the pawl is locked out. If I unlock the pawl, aka the choke being open, the primaries open correctly, or secondaries open correctly. All right, now we need to check our secondaries opening distance. So right now we're just a 2-barrel, nothing's happening, right? And then we full throttle and the other 2 barrels in the back open, close, closed all the way. So this distance right here, right as the secondaries are starting to open, should be 7/16 of an inch. So I'm looking for 28/64 on my scale, and right now I'm at 24/64, so 3/8. So how do I fix that? Well, I got to pull this little rod off, little connecting rod, and I just launched that clip somewhere. We're going to have to open this up just a little bit. So, all right. Right there, right on the money. Right as they're starting to open, 28/64. All right, now that we got our secondaries working correctly, our choke lockout is working correctly, so the secondaries aren't opening when the choke is on. Now we're good to start working on the internals of the carburetor, and this is where it's a lot easier. So what we're going to do is grab our gaskets. Now, I'm not doing this step, but you would normally take this brass plug out down here in this corner by the accelerator pump, swap the ball bearing out. But if it's clean and it's moving with freely with no issue, then you're good to go. Now I ran this through a sonic cleaner, so it's pretty dang clean. But if you're doing this by hand, make sure you get some carb cleaner down in there if you can't get it out. So again, front of the carburetor, back of the carburetor, primaries, secondaries. So we have 4 Venturis. Our secondary Venturis only have one big tube. Okay. There he is. See, big tube. All right. And it's going to have a bleed screw, or I'm sorry, a bleed hole on the one side of it. Now, you're going to find the appropriate gasket, like so, and that bleed screw goes away from you. The front of the carburetor is here, the back is here. Bleed screw always goes away. Now these guys, these are for your primaries. You're going to want to make sure the gasket's sitting correctly. There is a small notch. And your tube also goes towards the back. So you got your bleed in the back here, and then this long tube is in the back. Now, a quick and easy way to test this is to quickly grab your choke horn and set her down on top. Don't force it. And make sure that you see those two tubes coming up through the choke horn in this top little part right here. See the brass? If you have them backwards, it ain't gonna line up. All right, now we're going to install our pump jet housing. All this guy does is support the primaries when wide open throttle happens. And take your needle, drop it down, not in the threaded hole, but the hole with a seat that's smooth bore. Place your gasket down on top. You're going to drop your return spring for your accelerator pump down inside. And then you're going to drop your accelerator pump down on top of it. Make sure that it is seated on the spring squarely, or as square as you can get it. And then you're going to take your freshly adjusted choke horn with the gasket, of course. And drop it down. Make sure not to bend those bleed needles. All right, make sure your choke still works. Make sure your throttle plate still works. Make sure your secondaries still work. Everything's good there. All right, now you're gonna find the rest of your screws. Now you get to find where they go. I believe this long one goes there. If it looks weird or doesn't go in all the way, it's in the wrong spot. All right, now you're going to take your idle mixture screws, screw them into the bores, so they're gently on the seat now. All right, so for the factory recommendation for the idle, it says 1.5 turns out. So 1.5. And a half right there. So our idle mixture screws are set good. So we don't have to worry about those until we're on the car again. Now we're going to take some more linkages. We're going to install our choke linkage. We're going to grab a clip for that. All right, now we're going to close the choke. Make sure our secondaries don't open. Open the choke, secondaries open, so everything's still good there. Our fast idle's right on the money. Now we're going to take our step-up rods, or metering rods, whatever you want to call them. They have springs. So you're going to drop those springs down in the bore. Very gently drop the needle in for both sides. If it's not going, don't force it. Just give it a little bit of a wiggle. Make sure everything's good. Take your covers and your screws. Run them down. Now for our accelerator pump linkage, you're going to have 3-hole selection. B, the middle one, is our selection that we'll be using, the screw we'll be using. You're going to slide your S hook in. Hook the accelerator pump. And then run your screw through. Again, don't force it. Let the faces seat correctly. Now you're going to take your throttle linkage for the accelerator pump. Let's see, you're going to want to slide the clip on first. Slide it through the middle hole. Lock her in. And then put it into your throttle assembly. And you're good to go there. So now, when we step on the throttle, everything should move correctly. All right, here's the intake manifold. And we're now going to mount the carburetor. But first, we need to put our choke on. All right, now we're going to drop our carburetor down the wrong way. I'm not mounting it right now, I'm just setting it down on it. All right. Now you hook your choke up. Now it's completely connected to all the automatic stuff to it. Now, I need to tighten these top flange bolts. All right, now we're hooking up the port vacuum to the distributor. So right here I've got my distributor from the Imperial, and I drilled out a flare nut to meet this correct size. I believe it's 1/8 inch tubing. It's air brake tubing, it's not normal vacuum tubing. And what we're going to be doing is converting it to push to connect. Now the push to connect fitting is a lot more reliable when you're taking the thing apart. And you can buy push to connect fittings in different size pipe threads and tubing sizes. But the major advantage to it is that air brake tubing is not going to collapse at all. Hot, cold, doesn't matter. So the big thing about this, to use the push to connect, you just push the air brake tubing in, and that's it. It's sealed. To take it off, you push the little black piece, and the tubing comes out. Now I can pull the distributor off. I can pull the carburetor off without having to go through some crazy mess of tubing breaking or anything like that. All right, now the only thing left that's really left to adjust is between the face of the top of the carburetor to the top of the plunger. So from there to the top of the plunger, it needs to be 7/16 of an inch. And then you just need to bend this rod to the correct distance until it matches up correctly. Everything else is pretty much it. I mean, Everything else will pretty much fall into place. If it doesn't, then something's wrong. So fast idle and curb idle have to be set while the vehicle's running and the vehicle's warm and all that kind of stuff. So I can't do anything else until the vehicle is running itself. But there's the carburetor rebuild on a Carter AFB 3108S. Obviously it'll work for a lot of other different models, just there are going to be minor differences, mainly with the linkages and stuff like that. So I hope this helped in some way or another. Maybe you learned something, maybe you didn't. It's okay. It's a very specific use. So I appreciate you watching if you've gotten to this point. I know it's going to be kind of a longer video, but there's a lot to this carburetor. So I will see y'all in the next video. It's most likely going to be on the Imperial again. And hopefully we'll get one step closer to getting the thing running and driving. So again, I appreciate it. If you stayed this long, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.